this is Marc Lamont Hill, who is not without sin on this issue. The funny thing, he was fired from CNN or some shit like that for telling the truth about Israel, but he also smeared people as anti-Semite. So he's not without sin on this issue, to be clear. But he's one of the only people who have access to Israeli government officials that has wanted to tell the truth on this issue. The fact that he is not without sin is how he gets this access in the first place. But here, he does a legitimately great job where you will never see anyone else do, where he gets this guy to admit, this guy, the former foreign minister of Israel, to admit that Israel deliberately targeting civilians. Feel free to interrupt anytime, guys, but I want to get your guys' reaction to this great. Once again, I got a lot of criticism on Marc Lamont Hill, but this is great stuff by him, to be honest. So let's listen.
He said that the humanitarian situation, quote, will only deteriorate exponentially, and that crucial life-saving supplies, including fuel, food, and water, must be allowed into Gaza. So the UN is saying you must do this. You are saying you're not going to do this. How do you?
No, we're not saying that.
He's saying do it. He's saying doing it immediately. What I'm saying is what you're doing.
No.
He's saying doing it immediately.
I got you. I'll tell you exactly what we're saying. I'm saying we will do everything for the Gazan people. Once and now, we demand immediate surrender, unconditional surrender of Hamas. If Hamas people come out with their hands up and clear their weapons, believe me, everything will be restored to Gaza. It is Hamas in Hamas hands.
Now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that, sir. I think we're actually on the same page here. You're saying that once Hamas leaves, you'll grant the Gazan people food, shelter, fuel, electricity, hospitals, schooling. And if they don't, and if Hamas doesn't leave, then they'll continue to starve and die in hospitals. You are defining for the international community right now collective punishment. You're saying until Hamas acts differently, the 2 million people in Gaza are going to be treated this way. And once Hamas acts differently, these 2 million people in Gaza will be treated better. That is exactly what collective punishment is. You're holding them accountable for the actions of others. That is the definition, the textbook definition of collective punishment, sir. Now you may accept.
Now Marc Lamont Hill just checkmated him, something that no one else on Western media is doing. But I'll let it continue.
That's what you want to do, but this is absolutely a contravention of international law.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. No, if we pushed them to the wall, we're not pushing them to the wall. We want to open a humanitarian corridor so they can leave. But if Hamas,
so that who can leave? Citizens? You're saying civilians can leave,
you're destroying
but only through the Rafah border, correct?
At this point, yes.
So they can't come.
Where else?
Your country. They can come into Israel.
Destroyed.
I'm telling you one more thing I want to say.
I want you to address that point. Don't just smile, sir. Respectfully, you're saying you're making a corridor. They can go to Egypt. You're bombing them. You say you want to save them, but they can't come in.
First of all, I'm not smiling. I'm crying in my heart.
Easily dismantled. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this because this segment is called essentially Israeli officials unhinged on national TV. This is a LPR tour. This is just one example of this. Ajamu, what's your thoughts? CJ, you get your thoughts on as well.
Absolutely.
Basically, if you have a real journalist raising the proper questions, this would be the response every time. But what we have in the U.S., we have propagandists posing as journalists. I mean, every point that Marc Lamont Hill made is spot on. That basically there's no argumentation that Israeli officials can engage in that will avoid the fact that they are involved in a vicious campaign that countervails international law, and that there is a grounding, a basis for an international criminal court prosecution if you had a real independent international criminal court, which of course we don't.
The Israeli spokespeople embarrassing themselves on media because they went, and a lot of them been successful because they go on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. They have softball, embarrassing interviews, and we see Marc Lamont Hill ask basic questions and trap this guy to admit that Israeli is committing a war crime. Their policy is of war crimes. Once again, Marc Lamont Hill is not without sin. We did a statement a few months ago criticizing him because he was calling someone an anti-Semite. I gotta remember the exact circumstance, but I remember I had my take was I can't believe he was doing that when he was fired from CNN for being one of the few people that criticized Israel. So that's the Israeli extremism that we were seeing. If you do what Marc Lamont Hill did, you are not allowed on CNN. Now let me quickly show you this one for sake of time. This is the Israeli ambassador to the UK. And I don't know what her intentions were in this interview. She would have got away with it. She was interviewing the average corporate journalist. I don't know the background of this person. But this person asked follow-up and then let her get away with the insanity that she was saying. I don't want to spoil, like, literally thing it speaks for herself. She's essentially doing genocide denial here.
What's the view on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza this morning?
Well, there is no humanitarian crisis because
there isn't.
There is no. Israel is.
There's 1,000 Palestinian babies that was killed. She is and they're committing a war crime. They're preventing food, fuel, electricity but she's saying there's no humanitarian crisis. So allow her to explain, because it gets even more intense from here.
In charge, it's because
there isn't.
There is no. Israel is in charge of the safety of the Israelis. Hamas is in charge of the safety of the Palestinians.
We've been showing pictures this morning that would illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you a mother?
Yes.
What would you think if your children would have been executed in front of your eyes? Would you expect your government to think about those Nazis committing those crimes and to say, wait a second, first of all, we need to protect the enemy, and then to protect my children? Your children come as priority to your prime minister. So do you know that?
We have been showing images this morning that illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
So blame Hamas and ask Hamas why they started those atrocities, walking around.
Very sane person here, right? This is the mindset of Israel and their officials here. It's okay for them to commit war crimes, and she's going to use the appeal to emotion. You're a mother, right? You as a mother, you just sponsored genocide. I'll let the clip continue, and I'll get your thoughts, Ajamu. We only got a minute here.
Acknowledge that there is a humanitarian crisis.
I'm saying there is no. Israel is working.
So what do you think is happening?
What is happening? There is a war in Gaza, a war that Hamas started by committing horrible massacre on innocent Israelis. The world have seen that. Wait a second.
That are innocent civilians.
Just I want to say and give a little bit of the context. Those people created crimes that are worse than ISIS. When the Americans started this fight of ISIS, together with the coalition forces, over 100,000 civilians got caught in a crossfire. Israel is trying to prevent that. Israel is better than any other army in the world. We are alerting. We're giving them the opportunity to have a shelter. We're doing things that no other Western army did in the past.
So I know that was hard to sit through, John. What's your thoughts?
That is, as you said, is reflective of a mindset that believes that a retaliation, collective punishment is appropriate. It's not about just targeting the so-called terrorists, but targeting the individuals, the people, the populace that they believe support their enemy. So the punishment of the people is an appropriate response to the sufferings of an Israeli mother. It is the assumption that the correct moral position would be that if your child was murdered or husband was murdered or whoever was murdered by Hamas, that the accepted response would be massive, indiscriminate retaliation, murdering everyone, guilty and innocent. This is the morality of psychopaths. But unfortunately, it's the morality that seems to have been embraced by officials in the West and people throughout the U.S. society. Now, I'm so happy and proud to see that there are young people across the U.S. and across Europe that have not allowed themselves to be intimidated into silence and non-opposition. They are facing their governments and these illegal bans on protest. that are not being intimidated into silence because they're being accused of being terrorist sympathizers or whatever, and they are standing up for the rights, for the humanity of Palestinians. This is another one. This is insane.
Yeah, I'm glad you've seen this one. Once again, this segment is all about Zionists going on this I don't know what they expected. Like they go on these PR projects, and the vast majority of the time, the corporate media talking head is holding their hand and like asking them questions to avoid them saying crazy shit. You know what I mean? But they can't help it sometimes. So here's another example. Here's an Israeli soldier essentially admitting that they're going to war with civilians.
I try to correct you to the answer. The war is not just with Hamas. The war is with all the civilians. That
you hear what he said? He said, I tried to correct you earlier because if you watch the full context of the interview, the black woman anchor, one of the Negro servants, she was kind of trying to like guide him through, like, come on, please don't say some shit. That'll be bad for PR for you here. And then he's like, no, let me correct myself. You misunderstood. We are committing a genocide. Well, John, what's your take on this?
Well, what got me is that where was the pushback from the interviewer?
Yeah,
that was the news that was being made. So you would think that any journalist worth their weight at all would say, well, can you clarify? Are you suggesting that the Israel is consciously engaged in activity that would be classified as war crimes? She had an obligation to raise that question.
Yes. Despite insane Israeli rhetoric, and this show why we got in the game we got into. That's why I don't understand sellouts on YouTube, because I wouldn't do this for any other reason other to flip people's opinion on the correct position. Correct? There's no other reason for me to do this other than to help the working class be more revolutionary, have more revolutionary discipline. You know what I mean? And we got a lot of work to do, right? And because of the nonstop, nauseating, pro-Zionist propaganda that we have in our media, you have Americans that overwhelmingly support Israel. I'll just read a few headlines here. Americans strongly support Israel, but there are generational and racial divides. I was looking at the survey earlier. Let me see if I can pull it up again, just so you guys have context. 77% of Republicans, 69% of Democrats said the United States should support Israel. Only 54% independents believe that, which I still think is a lot. But the racial gaps are much larger and the age gaps is larger. 78% of those who are I think they're like Gen X or older, 45 or older, think the United States should support genocide. But only 48% of people under 45 does. Which was, again, I think these numbers these are disgusting numbers, but at least half our generation get it. But Gen X and above, they sponsoring genocide just based on these numbers. But John, feel free to interrupt if you want to chime in.
No, I'm curious. I haven't seen this one.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that we get a chance to break this down by number. This is the graph I saw earlier. Look at the silent generation. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. So the gray is the people who don't know shit about the issue, which is fair because people got a lot of shit going on. So gray people like, I don't know what the fuck going on. Green are the people who strongly support Israel. The people who are in the orange are based. Understand what the fuck is going on. Look at the silent generation and baby boomers. This is the result, and even Gen X, this is the result of nonstop corporate media pro-Zionist propaganda.
Exactly.
And we got a lot of work to do.
Well, now where's the race thing?
Let's go by race. If I remember right, I think it was 50% of Black Americans. Here it is. When they said non-whites, they say along racial lines, just 51% of non-whites in the United States said the United States should support Israel, which is a fucking ton. A ton of non-whites saying they support the genocide of Palestinians. But look, 72% of white people, 7 out of 10, support genocide in Israel. So I'm up for a challenge. We got a lot of work to do. These are horrific numbers. But John, what are your thoughts on it?
No, I think that look, I think you're right. That basically 25 years ago, you would have a number of non-whites at 51%. But again, it just demonstrates how far to the right the U.S. as a society has moved. But
Absolutely.
again, we have hope because you have these young people who are not falling for the okie doke. They haven't fallen for it completely on Ukraine. They didn't fall. They're not falling for it now with Palestine, but they're paying the price. But that's all right, because that's the basis we are trying to organize on. You know,
Yeah.
the young folks, the young working class people, black folks, black working class folks, you know, because it is the working class that's paying the price for these conflicts. This money and the resources they're using to prop up Ukraine and Israel and everybody else, they're using public resources. Okay,
Yeah.
you can't get medical care and food and adequate housing and consistent food, et cetera, because the bourgeoisie are using your resources to prop up, their geostrategic interests, be it supporting Israel, Ukraine, or whatever. Okay, so people are beginning to make those connections to begin to understand that this thing is rigged and that to be a U.S. nationalist is to be opposed to your own interests. So what we have to do as revolutionaries, we've got to continue doing the work. Using these opportunities to point out the contradictions, moving people toward organization, engaging in the teachings on the local level, building local power, building dual and contending power is a process, but it's a process that we can win because it's not sustainable for them to try to maintain this relationship of exploitative power. It's not sustainable. Outside of the white West, the entire global South are like, hey, we see now what people like Ajamu and others have been saying. The
Yeah.
West represents an existential threat to global humanity. Okay? And so we've got to get our stuff together, engage in opposition in our countries, but also to be in a position to support oppositional activity, oppositional work, oppositional politics within the center of empire.
This is why it's such an honor to have you on. It's great to have your knowledge because this is the revolutionary optimism, the revolutionary discipline that we've been talking about.